Hi guys, how's it going? Hope you're all well. So this video is going to be on the economics IGCSE exam structure. So we're going to look at paper 1 and paper 2 and how both exams are structured. Now, to get the most out of this video or this lesson, whatever it is, I would like for you to open up the end of year paper that I've uploaded on Google Classroom, which is titled Last Year EOY Paper. Open that up as we go along, okay? So just a quick rundown of the two papers. So paper 1 is completely a multiple choice paper. So you'll be given 30 questions and all the questions are multiple choice and you have to choose one correct answer. You'll have a lot of space to do your working. If you need to do calculations, if you need to draw a graph, there's space for you to do it. But at the end of the day, the only answers that they're going to mark are the choices that you have made, which is either A, B, C, or D. So you're not going to get marks for drawing graphs, where you're working out, or anything like that, okay? But those will help you in answering the questions. And it's fairly simple. If you want some material on multiple choice questions, I suggest you use the textbook. At the end of each chapter, there are there are loads of multiple choice questions over there. Practice them, and yeah, if you've revised the chapter well, or if you studied it well for that matter, then you should be able to get the answers correctly. So that's paper 1. It's very straightforward. Paper 2 though. Paper 2 is, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a bit more complicated, but it is a bigger paper. It's a 90-mark paper. So there are 90 marks and it is split into two sections. We have section A and section B. So section A is compulsory. All of you have to do it, okay? So it is 30 marks and you have to answer all the questions that they've given you. And normally there will be about, 8 questions there. Now in those 8 questions, it will start with a define question where you just define the term they give you, or an identify question where they ask you to identify something from the case study. And afterwards, there will be 2-mark and 4-mark questions, which will be either explaining or analyzing. And then you'll have the 2 6-mark questions, which will be discussion questions. Those discussion questions are the ones that I'm going to be going in depth with you in a bit, but I just want to go through the others. So in an identify question or a define question, all you have to do is define the concept that they've given you or identify it. You do not need to do any more than that. That's for an identify question. So if the question says identify, you literally just do that. You literally just say, this is what it is. Or if they ask you to define a concept, you literally just define it. You don't analyze it, you don't evaluate, you don't do any of that. You just define it. So, for example, if they were to say define demand, you would say demand is the willingness of a consumer to buy a product at a particular price at a particular time. Right? That's just the definition. That's it. Now the explanation questions. In explanation questions, those are usually about 4 marks. What you would have to do is, for that, you'd answer the question, whatever it is, and then you just explain it. That's it. There's really nothing much else to that. You can use the case study to help you explain it, and that's it. It's literally 1 mark for identifying it and the 2nd mark for explaining it. Now, this is where you really need to focus, okay? So if you were to go in the end of year paper, you'll notice that in question 1, there is 1 analyze question and 2 discuss questions for the first, section A. Yeah, for section A, you'll see that there are 2 discuss questions and 1 analyze question. In the analyze question, what do you need to do? You need to do something called chains of reasoning or chains of analysis. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you answer the question, you make your point, whatever the point is. So in this case, what is this? Analyze why the consequences of external costs is a misallocation of resources. So first of all, you'd say why it is a consequence of you would say one of the reasons why external costs is a result of misallocation of resources. For example, you could say the resources should have been invested in somewhere else as opposed to being in where it's invested. And after that, you have to give a chain of reasoning saying why and what is the effect. Okay, so for example, in this question it says misallocation of resources, why the consequence of this external cost is a misallocation of resources. So you'll start by saying external cost is a consequence of misallocation of resources because resources are not allocated effectively, which results in a number of external costs, one which leads to higher unemployment, for example, or a lack of skills with the people, or anything like that. But then afterwards, you just have to keep analyzing it further and further and further. Okay? So that's for this question. Let's go on to the discussion questions. The discussion questions are a little bit trickier. Now, why are they a little bit trickier? Is because, actually, I wouldn't go as far as saying they're tricky, they're just a little bit different, but not too much. You do the same thing as you would in question F, in that you would analyze the questions, but then after you analyze the concept, what do you have to do? You have to do a thing called evaluating. Now, what does evaluating mean? It means once you have argued one side of the question in the evaluation, you have to argue the other side. Now, this is a very important point because this is where you're going to get those extra marks. The other part that you need to add would be a conclusion, because in a discussion question, you need to add all of the points needed to answer the question. So the question is asking you to discuss. You cannot make a discussion without a conclusion and without evaluating. Otherwise, you're analyzing, right? So let's look at one of the questions here. Let's look at, okay, here. I don't know what NEVs are, but let's have a look. Discuss whether or not there are likely to be any external benefits from the use of NEVs in Chinese cities. So NEVs, where does it say that in this question? NEVs are new energy vehicles, so that means electric vehicles or hybrids. Okay. So the question is asking you, discuss whether or not there are going to be likely any external benefits from the use of NEVs. So an external benefit would be any benefit outside of the firm in terms of the use of NEVs. So let's look at some external benefits, okay? So an external benefit in a Chinese city would be that there would be less pollution, obviously, which would mean one of the factors that would improve as a result of that would be life expectancy, better standard of living, and if you were to do a chain of reasoning, those are the chains of reasonings you would do. So you would start by saying one of the external benefits of the use of NEVs in Chinese cities would be the reduction in pollution from NEVs. If you can find something in the case study to apply it, that would be great. The use of NEVs would result in a better standard of living for the people because the lack of pollution will lead to an overall better health for the people, which will increase life expectancy, which can promote the economic growth for the Chinese cities. And that will be as a result of continued employment from the Chinese people and the constant influx of tax revenue received as a result of the longer life expectancy. You see, there's a whole chain of reasoning over there. Yeah. But now that we've done the chain of reasoning or the chain of analysis, whatever you want to call it, let's get into the discussion. So you have to do the evaluation now. And the best way to start your evaluation is to say, however. So you would say, however, not all Chinese people can afford NEVs, as the prices of electric vehicles are generally higher than normal petrol-powered vehicles. So, although it may be promoted, it may not be affordable for everybody, which may limit the use and the purchase of NEVs, which will negate any kind of economic growth in the country. You see, you created a chain of reasoning from your evaluation. If you do a beautiful chain of reasoning from the evaluation, you'll get your marks, no problem. Now, to follow that, you should come up with a conclusion. So the conclusion should be, do the benefits outweigh the costs, or do the costs outweigh the benefits? Okay? Simple. And that's it. Whenever you do your discussion questions, just make sure you have that. You continue the same analysis point like you would in the previous questions, but you have to add a evaluative point and a conclusion. That's the difference. That will get you the extra mark from 5 till 6 in questions G and H for the discussion questions. Now that I've gone through that, I just want to go through section B with you very quickly. There really isn't much to explain here, but you'll be given a choice of 4 questions, okay? So out of those 4 questions, you only have to answer 3 of them, okay? Pick 3. Don't spend too much time on picking them. Just find the ones which you feel are easier, or the one that you know best, and answer those. If you look at, for example, let's have a look at section B, okay? I haven't had a chance to look at it. Let's see what kind of questions are there. Okay. Define the economic problem. That's something I could do. That seems simple. Explain whether land is mobile. That's pretty simple in my opinion. Analyzes the cause to shift to the right in supply curve of chocolate. I like supply and demand, so I'd like to do that question. Discuss whether or not consumers would benefit from a firm being a monopoly. Yeah, that sounds like a good question. Get started. All right. Now, make sure you don't spend too much time on each question. Make sure you allocate enough time for all 3 questions that you're going to choose in this section, okay? Don't spend too much time on one question. Don't spend too little time on another question. Then let's look. Trade union. That's fairly simple. I mean, influences on what a product's... identify 2 influences on what products a person buys. Yeah, I guess. Explain 2 ways the government could decrease the consumption of demerit goods. Yeah, I can do that. You can, for example, demerit goods like cigarettes. You can inform them about the health risks and things like that, labels. Analyze why workers may join a trade union. That's a fairly simple question, I think. Discuss whether or not tertiary sectors are paid more than primary sectors. Yeah, that sounds like a really good question. So, there we go. Now, once you've done 2 questions, you're like, okay, now you only have 1 more to do, and you have 2 choices. So here, do whichever one you feel is easier. So let's have a look-see. Define a production possibility curve, PPC. That seems okay. Explain why demand for soap is more price than elastic. Then, yeah, I like elasticity. Analyze using supply and demand. I'm all for supply and demand. I love supply and demand. Public sector should be responsible for the supply of all internet services. That's a kind of tricky question, but it's not so bad. But I would do that. Now let's look at the last question. So the last question, in the previous question, the 8 mark is the one that I was a kind of bit iffy about. So let's see. Let's look at the other one. Discuss whether or not government should impose a maximum price on food. It's not a bad question. Analyze the effects on income distribution and tax revenue of an increase in indirect tax. Yeah. Extension and increase in demand. Yeah. Those are both equal. As a matter of fact, it actually makes my choice a little bit difficult, but I think I would go with the question 3. That's probably the easiest one I think I would go for. So anyway, now that I hope you had a better idea of what the questions are, just so you know, one last thing. In each question in section B, you get 4 questions only. 1 identify or define question, an explain question, an analyze question, and a discussion question. You will notice that the analysis question is 6 marks, which means that you just have to create a longer chain of reasoning or make multiple points for your answer, okay? Do not just use it'll be more than section A, where it's only 5 marks, obviously. The same thing with the discussion question. The discussion question is 8 marks. So if it's 8 marks, that means that you just need to evaluate more, you need to analyze more. All right? I'm not going to tell you how many points to make. I think, it's hard to say that 2 developed points will be enough, but in certain cases it might be. But sometimes you might need more in order to answer a question, right? So I would say for a discussion question, try and get at least 3 developed points. No, at least 2 developed points. A third would help if you want to go for the absolute top marks, highest marks, 8 marks, 7 marks. And in evaluation, you need 2 solid evaluative points with a conclusion. If you were to follow that structure, you're on the upper band, so 7 or 8 marks. All right. Okay. I hope that video helped. I hope you got a better understanding of it. Also, one last thing, on the textbook there are multiple questions that you can practice from after the end of each chapter. I suggest you study them very well. And one thing I'd just like to end on as well, do not just memorize. Do your best to try and understand everything, okay? As opposed to just revising and memorizing formulas. Me personally, I never learned that way. I learn by understanding what I'm actually studying, okay? So, for example, average cost, okay? So we know that average cost is, so looking at the average cost of a firm. So how do we calculate that? Well, an average is basically, you have a bunch of units, what's the average cost of it? So, how do you calculate that? Well, total cost divided by output. I'm not even sure if that's the correct answer. I'm pretty sure it is. But if we type here average cost formula, you'll see, total cost divided by output. So it's better to understand it as opposed to just memorizing it. I never learn by memorizing. I never learn by memorizing. I cannot do that. Do your best to try and understand it, so that especially in the multiple choice questions, it will help you a lot more with that. Okay, guys? Good luck. I'm sure you guys will do very well. If you follow my instructions, hopefully you will do really well in the paper. Make sure you study all units. Make sure you study all the graphs. Make sure you know how to draw every single graph, PPC, supply and demand, economies of scale, all of them. Okay? Make sure, and don't be afraid to use them in your answers, especially for analysis and discussion. Yes? Take care. Good luck, guys.